Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie, and today I'm delighted to be joined by four excellent customer experience analysts to run through all the latest news from the space. Yesterday, I am joined by Zeus Kerravala, principal analyst at ZK Research, Liz Miller, VP and principal analyst at Constellation Research, Rebecca Wettemann, CEO and principal analyst at Valoir, and Michael Fauscette, founder, CEO, and chief analyst at Aragon Research. It's great to have you all join me today, and let's get right into this news. And I want to start with last week's Webex One event, with lots of really great news coming from this, including a new AI assistant, the launch of Webex Go with AT&T, and perhaps most interestingly from a CX perspective, the announcement of two new CCaaS packages, Webex Customer Experience Basic and Essentials. Zeus, I saw you were posting quite regularly from the event, so maybe I'll start with you on this. What most caught your eye?
Yeah, I think it's interesting the approach Cisco's taking. Well, I guess it's to be expected, right? They've built Webex CCaaS on top of the Webex, the Webex meeting platform, and so what that allows them to do actually is you talked with the AI assistant. Is the AI assistant that you use in CCaaS is the same one you'd use in their UCaaS platform, which is also the same one that we use in Vidcast and Slido and anything Webex related. So it creates one experience across the different products. And so I think that's, for them, they're going to be taking CCaaS to their Webex base first. They'll be taking it through the IT Pro first. And so I think, for them, that approach, makes sense to try and tie it together. But I think the one thing that I like, though, is that similar experience. Historically, Cisco hasn't really been great on making sure their user experiences were consistent, version to version, release to release, product to product, right? And the other thing you mentioned too was the different packages. What they're trying to do here is give customers options to be able to get in at different price points, including free if if you're a small business and you're using Webex already. And so I think for Cisco, it's their biggest problem isn't product anymore. We talked a lot about this at the event. It's getting people to try the product again, because people that used Webex 4, 5, 6 years ago, whenever I ask them about Webex, they go, I didn't even know they were still around, or I used that product and it was terrible. And I think they've got to get people to try it again. And I think in this case, by creating all these different options and packages, they're reducing that barrier to entry. And so there's a Webex package for everyone, right? And hopefully they'll, like I said, the product quality really outweighs, mindshare right now.
I just worry that whole traditional ABC, right? In the Silicon Valley, there's an infamous statement of anyone who's buying is either a Cisco buyer or they're an ABC buyer, meaning anyone but Cisco. You would literally find any other vendor under the sun than working with Cisco. And that's a long held and sadly kind of ingrained belief from things. And I think, Zeus, you hit it right on the head, right? Like things got a little rocky, but that was like 10 years ago, right? And so I think that it's a mindset shift. I think that, Zeus, what you pointed out was spot on. And I think it also came through loud and clear in some of the other partnerships that they also announced, because they're trying to take their service where their customers actually are, as opposed to like old Cisco, old Webex, which was come here, you're here, whether you like it or not. Let's use the Apple announcement as a perfect example of that. Like, not that I want to use Webex on my Apple TV, but if I chose to, I could, right? It's about ease of use. Like the TV in back of me is Apple TV enabled. I can spin around and do this there, right? So I think that they're really mindful of the fact that this whole concept of work from anywhere also means work from any surface and work from any platform. So they've done a really intentional job of decoupling their solutions from the where. I think that's really the next stage of this mindset of let's stop kind of getting really ingrained in the battle of the CASs, right? Like, are you UCAS? Are you CCAS? What are you doing? And, like that bickering. And let's admit that people want to work and collaborate and engage both with each other and with their customers as if they were collaborating with each other on a unified platform. And I think that's where the thinking is going. I think it's just going to be a matter of, can we get over the mindset shift, and can we get over some of the sales and service challenges the customers keep bringing up to make sure that again, Zeus nailed it, that the innovation on the product can sing through that kind of quagmire of everything that's happened in the past.
The one thing underneath that, and Liz, you sort of started in that direction, that I thought was really interesting, is the shift overall among, the customer service world has been towards collaborative incident management, or swarming, as Salesforce calls it. And they're sort of set up perfectly to do that. And you can see that they're now starting to enable that across the whole platform, because you do have the connectivity already. If you're a Webex customer and you're using it across your business, you can bring anybody into that incident that you need to. And now, with this changes, it seems like that is set up to work really well. And then I thought the other thing that was interesting is, from a small business perspective, I think that free basic add-on is really smart. That could really help sort of get over the old pushback around.
Well, it's actually designed for small business. Before, they'd always try and push their large enterprise products into small businesses, right? So
Yeah, excellent. I think, lots of really great stuff there. And as you say, it kind of meets that trend of enterprises. They have a lot of problems staffing their contact centers, and they're kind of using that new platform.
one of the interesting things they talked about, and this is worth maybe a whole discussion outside of this, is what are the new metrics for contact centers, right? Because if you implement all the AI stuff correctly, your call handle time is likely to go up, because now your agents are actually doing more complex issues. And we had talked about, in theory, agent churn should go down. And so are those, the way we measure contact centers historically been on call handle time, wait time, things like that. And I think the industry does need a new set of metrics with which to measure by. So that'll be interesting to see how that manifests itself. So.
I think we have to look at agent training time too, right? Because it's not just the turnover on agents, it's onboarding those agents. And if I can cut training time by, call it 30%, with some of these new capabilities, then I've just cut up a huge piece of variable overhead in my.
And it shifts it's funny because it shifts the metric, right? And Zeus, Rebecca, I mean, like, if I combine both of the thoughts you just brought up, it goes back to this thing that's been happening across the totality of customer experience, right? Which is, hey, guess what? Customer, not actually the enemy. It's this really weird idea, right? And so we've been treating, especially in contact center, I mean, as long as we all have been in this and have been actually working in contact centers, let's admit it, like, we kind of sometimes treat the customer like they're this really awful, like, human meat suit that insists on calling in, and we should just get them away. But that's totally contrary to this whole idea of customer experience, and more importantly, the customer apostrophe S experience, right? If we want their experience to be one that's really robust, that there's a lot of, loyalty and advocacy around, you don't want to reduce their call time. It's like this really weird idea. Yeah, it's really crazy. So I think as you allow systems to do exactly what Rebecca said, train people faster, allow people to actually work better so that they can spend more valuable time, to Zeus's point, on the phone, right? Because it's about the valuable time, and it's about, for both our customers and our employees. And I think that's the shift. But I also think that that's the shift, because I know Charlie wants to talk about this next topic. I don't know if any of you guys have heard about this stuff. It's called Generative AI. You spell it with an A and an I. It's this thing that's been happening. I don't know.
Yeah, and to that point, as you said, I do want to talk about that next. I'll quickly transition, but I think it is also interesting that talk around connecting your operational contact center metrics with your customer metrics. That links back to a conversation we previously had about Genesys customer experience index, and NICE also had their industry benchmark solution too, which also had a similar premise. So I think that's an interesting conversation to kind of cover in the future. But as you said, I do want to move on to generative AI. And Webex themselves brought out a kind of conversation summary solution and suggested responses application at Webex One. And that kind of mirrors a lot of other event innovations that have been going on across the CCaaS space. Yet many other vendors over the past month have launched various generative AI solutions, including Avaya, Dialpad, Talkdesk, SAP, Sugar CRM, Zendesk as well. So it'd be great. Yeah. Yeah.
So what's on the checklist for everyone then, right? It's got to be suggestions, I've got to have advanced security and trust
with a layer.
I've got to have guardrails. If you put those things on your bingo card for Gen AI, I think you probably want.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Governance. Yeah. I mean, summarization of anything, some kind of virtual assistant, whether you call them a co-pilot or not, you have to generate responses to customers in written or verbal methods, right? I mean, and your chatbots got smarter, and your agents are happier. That's sort of all of those announcements in my book.
The only question I have is how does a customer evaluate which is better? Because everybody says they have the best AI, right? And it's not like there's a universal script that you run. And in some ways, maybe it doesn't matter because as long as it gives you some recommendations and they're not completely wrong, it's probably better than what the agent's going to come up with off the top of their head, right? And so, but if for a customer now, if I was evaluating these platforms now to try and figure out, I'm not sure how I would do it because they're all going to give you some kind of recommendations. Are they the best? That's subjective, right?
That's the main trick because it's about your data too. It's also about how you finish training it. So it's like everyone gets to wash their hands at the end of the day and say, well, I mean, we are the best, but your data messed it up.
Well, I think there's another piece. I think there's another thing under there too, though. This idea of whether it's a proprietary model or they're open and they connect to any model. And I think that makes a big difference in the way it functions. And it's also going to make a difference in the future because those models change dramatically. I mean, I don't just, for example, if you use Bard in January, you would have hated it. But if you use it now, I mean, it's actually pretty good. It's you want to be able to switch. And I just feel like the ones that have gone down the proprietary path, that's just going to lock you in. And that is definitely something I would evaluate if I was looking at that.
I'll share with you guys as all these announcements were coming out. Constellation was hosting its annual event, Connected Enterprise. And so we had about 250 to 300 anytime there are CXOs. And so we're sitting there talking about it. And it's like, everyone kept coming back to AI, generative AI. Hey, AI isn't just generative AI, like all the conversations you would think that the CXOs were having. And we finally just asked everybody in the room, like, how many of you are actually just kind of racing forward into this future? You're hearing that everyone has it. Let's get our data ready. Come on. And like the room kind of sat back and was like, we're not ready to just unleash this stuff. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so people are really looking for those very specific value driving, business driving use cases. And what's interesting is almost everyone came back and said the thing that feels easiest to try right now, so where the experiment can actually kind of move forward and not really hurt anything, is in customer service and is in the contact center. And when I asked, okay, great, that's so interesting, why? The answer always came back to, well, it feels like someplace where if something goes wrong, we can kind of clamp it down really, really fast. I'm like, that's not a great answer. Like that, yeah, that's like, it's a contained fire instead of a wildfire, like was not the answer I was going for. But interestingly, it's because there's so much noise about it. And that's when I got worried because the noise is getting made exactly to your earlier points, guys, which is this noise is being made by a lot of vendors who raced forward into generative AI. Like, remember January and February when everyone's like, hey, it's going to save the industry. And like, we all ran into it. And now everyone's releasing it 6 months later. There is this feeling that this is the place where it's most ready. And I had to sit back and think to myself, is it most ready? Because I don't necessarily think it is.
And I think too, we're asking business users, sales and service leaders to take on a lot, to Zeus's point about how do you evaluate these things? How do I know as a business user whether ServiceNow's proprietary model that means my data doesn't go anywhere else is better than Salesforce's model with guardrails? And I think what Sugar is doing is kind of an interesting approach where they're saying, no, you shouldn't have to know about prompts. You shouldn't have to know about how to ask the model how to do something at a very simplistic level. We're going to mask all that complexity for you and say, as a sales user, we should be doing the heavy lifting to deliver those pieces. Now, that means that there's a certain trust component involved, but let's say you don't have to be an AI expert, nor should you as a sales or service leader or agent or salesperson. be trying to become a data expert to understand and evaluate these different solutions and what they deliver.
Yeah. Well, the other thing Sugar did that I really liked was, and I agree with you, moving the prompt back a layer is really important and making it so that I can just naturally interact with the system versus having to become a prompt engineer. But the other one is in the way they set up their the trust layer, which of course everybody has to have, is that instead of just filtering, which is pretty much what Salesforce had done, they built in this masking function. So if it's data that needs to be passed to the model for it to make the right decision, but you don't want PII involved, it actually intelligently masks that so that it can't tell that there's PII involved. And then when it comes back, it puts it back in the other form. So I thought that was really smart.
I got it. Maybe I'm just gonna be like negative Nancy on a start of a week here, but everyone's doing that. Like if you dig through the marketing language that everyone has put around not only prompt engineering, the data collection, the actual model selection, because AI has always been dependent on model selection. It's never been a case of one model, one response. That's called ML, kids, right? Like there's a difference there. And so when I think we talk about AI, I mean, you can go through sales technologies like Pros. You can go through service technologies, whether it's what they're doing on Sugar, what they're doing with, a dial pad, what they're doing at Talkdesk, what they're doing at Zendesk. Every single one, they've got really, really smart AI people involved with this. I mean, look at what Adobe's doing, right? You've got really, really smart people. That Firefly model is hot, right? It is. And then the Image 2 model is even hotter. So I think that this is certainly like the AI guru's time to shine. The question though always comes back to, is there a business model? Is there a business reason why all of this resource has to be pulled? Because here's the ugly truth that's happening in organizations right now. They're pulling budget to fund AI experiments, right? And where they're pulling budget from are really important places like security. And that's what terrifies me, right? So if the vendors are doing awesome things, and that is not the question. The question is when it gets to the enterprise level and it gets to our customers. I mean, I don't like having to have multiple conversations a week where I have to say, did you really want to put that security project on hold so that you could figure out how to play with Gen AI? Like, please don't. Like,
The other part of this too, and you talked about the data, and I brought this up to one of the customers at the NICE event. Is do you actually have your data ready for this? Because if you think about CX, and we call this the CX, show or whatever, but we're most of what we talk about is CCaaS, which is the very back end of CX, right? There's a whole other world of you talked about Adobe, Liz. They do like when I talk to them about CX, it's sales and marketing at the front end, right? There's companies that do web analytics, and so I asked one of the NICE customers about it, and she told me they were trying to take all their data, normalize it, and stick it in a snowflake. You stick it in Snowflake, right? With which, but I mean, that's like a 5-year journey, right? Like,
And it's not just the data too, right? It's, do you have the policies in place? Do you have the training in place? Only 16% of companies have a policy for the use of Gen AI today. And even fewer have any kind of training around it. So how do I make sure not just the data is ready, but that I'm walking the walk and I have the business and emotional intelligence and the critical thinking and all those sorts of things that happen when I start exposing data in new ways.
I asked the terrifying question of, how do you connect it all? Right. So everyone wants a recommendation engine. Everyone wants a Gen AI who's creating emails. Okay, so I have that in my CCaaS tool. I also have that in my sales engagement tool. I also have that in my service and knowledge tool. Oh, wait a minute now. I also have it in this land called marketing. And so now I've got 7 different AIs in one single CX organization that might be creating emails and might be generating content using 7 different models, 7 different data sets, and 0 governance to go across all of them. And that's the part that we're not focusing on, because right now, because of all the excitement, yes, and it's all these little fiefdoms, but then what were we talking about last year? We got to deconstruct the silos. If we bring the silo walls down, like, 12 months ago, we were going on about silos. All of a sudden, we forgot about them and we decided to let generative AI build them again for us. Like, it's this really wacky time because generative AI changed the game. It absolutely did. But now, what I'm already seeing, and I don't know if you three are also seeing this, there is going to be a really marked backlash on all of this around AI fatigue, where people are just going to be like, I don't want to hear about it anymore. It hasn't done anything for me yet. Like, I don't want to hear about how this is going to change it. Like, y'all have it, it's table stakes. And there's going to be this backlash. And what's going to be interesting about the backlash is just as loud as the excitement over being able to break up with someone and sound like Shakespeare was. It's also going to be just as loud when people start getting burned by it. Right. So we're going to get this consumer momentum that's going to be talking about how they don't like it. And then we're going to get this CXO momentum about saying, I haven't done anything with it yet. All of a sudden, especially in CCaaS, it's going to get commoditized. Yes, right? And there's going to be, and then here's the other thing. In the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see a data breach. We're going to see a security attack that's actually generated by AI that's going to catch everyone off guard. It's going to be as stunning as, as one of those SolarWinds moments. And all of a sudden, everyone's going to know a new word. No one knew what a supply chain attack was until the SolarWinds attack happened. Same thing's going to happen, and the root of it's going to be AI. So the question becomes, are we ready for that? But also, what's going to happen underneath with all these CCaaS vendors, with the UCaaS vendors? We love to talk about consolidation. It's not really about consolidation that I'm worried about. It's about the commoditization, because we're talking about AI as if it's chewing gum.
I think the governance and compliance issues are a great place. I just interviewed I just did a show on one of my podcasts about the governance compliance. Interviewed a guy who was ex UK government regulatory person who now works for Data IQ. And one of the things that really came out clearly was this idea that it needs to be intentional up front. Before you go into these other things, you really have to think through the governance and compliance issues, even if there's not a regulatory framework in place yet. Or if you're in a regulated industry, it's going to have impact on you, right? If you're in healthcare, you still have to worry about HIPAA, and so I think that's the part that companies, you're doing all these little experiments, and that's great. And I think they should be trying it. I think they should be using it. But I also think that somebody needs to own that stepping back and going, okay, this is good, but we need to have a framework in place to make sure that we stay compliant, that we have some governance on it, that we're having some control in place. And I think that's the part that's missing in the conversation a lot today.
Awesome. Well, I think lots of really good stuff there. I mean, slightly alarming to hear that a lot of companies are taking money out of security for AI for AI innovation. But
It is not fun. Yeah, it's not. It is not good. It is not a good story.
yeah, but considering it's a race, actually, this brings us on to our next topic quite nicely. In fact, that Gartner has put out some research, as I'll pop up on the screen, that kind of CCaaS, the growth of CCaaS has been declining, which with all this AI talk, you'd maybe think it would be going the other way. And that kind of, the research shows the deceleration of the CCaaS market across the past 6 quarters. Maybe the first kind of 3 or 4 was expected due to the pandemic, but it seems to have continued this trend. I don't know, maybe I'll pass this one onto you, Liz, to start with. If you've seen that trend in the market also, and if so, what are the potential causes?
I mean, hey, there's a funny thing. Once you buy it, you tend not to want to buy it again. I mean, the reality is that people have made this switch, right? And people have made this switch to the cloud. All of the talk of innovation, all of the advancements, all of the new things, CCaaS is going to have to buckle in and really get ready for something Zeus actually mentioned earlier, which is the pace of innovation, right? In cloud and in CCaaS and in any software as a service, the pace of innovation has to keep moving forward. And it's not to get new customers, it's to keep the customers you signed up 6, 8, 9, 10 quarters ago. That's when you start to get into these ugly conversations around vendor lock-ins. And what do you mean you're automatically going to increase my contract by 3% every year, even though I don't use all my seats today? This is where we're going to start to see this market have to face that pattern of what software as a service has been doing to itself for several years now. So I think you're going to start to see that continue to slow. But again, it's something I said earlier. And, UCaaS is starting to consolidate. We're starting to see, folks chew up and gobble up little pieces. The reason why they're in this frenetic pace of merger and acquisition, of trying to buy and consolidate, is because they already turned themselves into a commodity. So when you turn yourself into a commodity and you want to go back to being an innovator, you go buy someone, and you go buy someone really fast, right? You try to make some new moves in the marketplace. That same pattern is about to hit CCaaS, right? And you're going to start to see CCaaS start to look everywhere else. Now, where I start to see it looking, I kind of want to start batting it back and be like, no, Patrick, that's not what we're doing today. Like, we're going on walks. And it's because I start to hear everyone being like, well, we have multi-channel communication. Well, we have journey orchestration. Maybe we're the new marketing automation tool. I'm like, no, that. Slow your roll, kids. Like, everybody slow down. No one's letting contact center run the marketing organization now. I think we need to take that, not panic about the decline. I think the decline was expected. I think it's been happening for a very, very long time if we had been paying attention. And the reality is it'll start to level out. You'll start to see that level out and go into a really nice pattern. But what you're going to start to see really quickly in the next, probably, I would say, 18 to 24. I don't know if you guys agree, but if they don't keep up with that pace of innovation to keep their customers, and especially in CCaaS, if they don't put their customers first. You can't sell a solution that claims to put the customer first and then do nasty things like long-term vendor lock-ins, arbitrary increases to fees. This is going to have to be a market that absolutely keeps their eye on customer satisfaction, on how their customer is treating their customer.
And it can't just be about delivery capabilities in the software, right? Particularly for the contact center manager who's not used to this sort of every quarter you're getting something new. No, it's going to have to be instrumented so contact center managers understand, what am I getting out of the software? Where could I get more value? There's some telemetry that needs to happen there. There's also some hand holding that needs to happen there, because you don't build it and they come in the contact center, right? You've got to bring them along the way, help them understand the value, help them turn on that value, help them get agents to use it, and help agents to be more effective in dealing with customers. And that is not just about pushing new capabilities out the door every quarter.
Yeah, I think but one of the issues is just law of large numbers, right? I mean, the market has gotten bigger, so you would expect the growth to decline. It's, very few markets can, right? It is a bit of math. But the other one is, I don't think the licensing models have kept up with all the changes. I was talking with one customer, and I won't say whose platform they're using because that would be bad for this. But I said, as you've moved from physical agents to virtual agents, how's that changed what you cost? He goes, oh, for us, it's been awesome because we pay for one, because this vendor is still using per seat pricing. So they charge you for a virtual agent, but then you can spin up as many conversations as you want, right? So he said, it's like the best deal ever. And I've talked to some of the vendors about, well, how are you licensing this? Because you're trying to apply a per user per seat model to virtual agents, and that doesn't really work or scale. And so some of the vendors they're thinking about it, and you got to go consumption based somewhere along the line here. But I think they've been scared to do that. AWS is really the only one that's embraced consumption based pricing, and I do think the industry is going to have to go that way sometime.
And look at the reaction when they have. Right? Like Salesforce, when they introduce with the GenAI, and if you want to have Data Studio, if you want to have Data Cloud on top of it, you want to have all the genies and the Einsteins and the things, that's a consumption model. And a lot of customers were kind of shocked by that initially. So that shock, I think, Zeus, you hit it right on the head. That shock's coming.
Well, and the shock comes from because you get hit with this big bill every once, if you're a seasonal business, you're going to have this massive bill between Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? If you're a retailer. I do think this is where the industry needs to take a page from utilities and things. Not that utilities are overly advanced, but your utility company will say, well, we understand that you're going to have spikes in the summer for AC and things like that. So they'll try and project what you're going to pay for the year and create a flat-based pricing model. The industry could do that. We just haven't, but I do think there's some innovation in pricing has to come here, because
Yeah, you could, and there's adjustments to that. Sure, it learns over time, but yeah, no, I think that's a very reasonable way to approach it. Yeah, we could. That's a good idea. How about that? That's amazing. That's amazing.
But I don't think the industry by and large has figured out how to price AI. I think it's something that
Well, and it takes a lot of resources too, and I think that's, from a vendor perspective, that's going to be a real learning experience, and again, not in a good way if they don't really think through that model.
But it's potentially why you're going to still see that line go down, right? I think the thing, honestly, when like not like my shock was that there was shock that the line was moving down. Like, did we not all like? I was like, wait a minute, that we got that was happening, right? Like, I don't.
I sort of wrote down back to normal when I looked at it. I just went back to normal.
We're going to ride that wave. I mean, but I think that the really interesting part about CCaaS decelerating is also it's bringing CCaaS into the focal point of the CFO. And to Zeus's point of that, like, because it was always like operations was going to keep that cost down, right? We're going to keep people off the phone, right? Remember meat suits. We're going to keep that stuff down. But now all of a sudden there's like, okay, wait a minute. We have to pay for generative AI on that. Remember how you guys were keeping costs down, but now you're spending more time on the phone with customers. You're using more of this AI stuff. You've got more IT resources coming in. So all of a sudden, I mean, I spoke with a CFO literally last week at our conference who was like, yeah, like I used to be able to just leave that in the hands of the COO if service and if contact center kind of sat in the office of the COO, right? I could leave that over there. I knew they were going to keep the cost down. I knew nothing crazy was happening over there. Oh, we're going to shift to the cloud. We're going to get more efficiencies. Okay, go ahead and do it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean you actually need more people? Like, what do you mean you need more IT resources? So it's actually kind of raising the visibility of the contact center. I think in places that the contact center does not want that visibility, like they don't necessarily want it.
Yeah, that's true.
Or what do you mean you don't know what your budget needs to be for this for next year?
Right. Well, I think I can take care of. I spoke with the head of technology, and he's like, "Well, we're trying to think of do we lower our budget now because we're just going to shift agents over to AIs?" And I'm like, "That's not the question to ask. You're fundamentally asking the wrong question in the wrong order because you somehow think that you're going to be able to get rid of headcount in the contact center because AI is just going to do it for you. Like, and you're in life sciences. Please don't do this, right? So to Rebecca's point of a really horrible thing happening publicly.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean the model. No, it's okay. I was just going to say, and there's also shift in the way that companies handle incidents and this idea around collaborative incident management. There's more people involved. We're moving across the company, but it doesn't change the agent count necessarily because now it's a very complex thing they have to quarterback. So this isn't a cost saving measure. This is a way to make the experience better. And that's a completely different way to think about it. And I think that's going to have some interesting downstream effects too.
well, that's going to be interesting because most contact center managers I've talked to, I think, do believe the number of. I think they're planning for decline in the number of agents. Right, is you have the virtual ones handle more. So we'll see if that happens. I suppose.
Yeah. And then won't it be weird if the churn number goes up? Right, to your point, we thought churn numbers were going to come down because AI is going to be everyone's co-pilot. But if we're asking fewer people to handle more complex things and not giving people that space, guess what? The Calm Out app built into your agent desktop ain't going to cut it.
Yeah, well, lots of really great points there, and I just I'm wary of the time. Maybe I was trying to stir the pot too much there with the whole CCaaS deceleration thing, but but yeah, just one quick final topic that I do want to touch upon. And as you mentioned that you wanted to talk about this is the C-suite change at Five9 and a new CMO coming in. Yeah, I guess I'll pass that over to you and ask why do you think this is worth a special mention?
Well, they've had the search open a long time, and I talked to Mike Berkman, their CEO, about some of the people they had looked at, and I was hoping this is the one they'd go with. And I think some of the things we talked about, Nikki Hall, who's their new CMO, will address. Like she was at Five9, and then she left and she went to Celigent, which and then more recently was at Content Square. And not a lot of people in this industry know Content Square, but you do if you're in sales and marketing. They play at the very front end of the customer journey. They do a lot of web analytics. They can tell you a lot of sophisticated things, like exactly why a customer didn't click here but clicked here, and right. And I think her knowledge of the front end of the customer journey will pair nicely with a lot of the stuff that they're trying to do that Five9's been good at historically. And as they look to go up the scale to enterprise, I think a lot of her skills and a lot of her knowledge will pair nicely. So, hopefully this is a trend we'll see across CCaaS where, we start thinking that, like, let's be real. We've all been in this industry a long time. It's a pretty small industry. And we tend to see executives move around from, contact center vendor to contact center vendor. And while Nikki is sort of a rebound into it, she spent some time outside it. And that's what I'd like to see, is some new people with different, sets of knowledge come into it, Adobe, companies like that. And so I do think a lot of these things are coming together. And so kudos to Mike for seeing that, and understanding that, and then hiring, I think, a person that fits nicely.
I think they've done that well at Five9, right? Because Genefa came from very far outside of that traditional CCaaS space, having been at HP, and I think Nikki continues that move forward. I'm going to be honest though, as I think she's an amazing hire. And I mean, at Content Square, tore it up. Great work that was done there, especially around the importance of kind of composability and specificity around language, and a lot of the messaging that was done there. I thought was a really, really good job. That's a very competitive space right now. So she really had to kind of show that very crisp demand gen kind of growth strategy for marketing, which I think is fantastic. Lots of boomerangs happening. And I think in this case, it's a really good one, because from what I gather from Mike, there are going to be some changes at Five9 for where he sees the capacity and where he sees the organization continuing to grow and push even the boundaries of CCaaS, right? He wants to push things forward. He wants to challenge. He wants to keep pushing everyone in the industry and nudging all across the way, right? And to do that, you need someone from the outside. You can't just bring in someone else from the industry, or all you're going to get is like shove, not push. So I think you're going to get more of the same. Absolutely. And so I'd love to see that also replicate across some of these other vendors, where like really go outside and bring someone in who's going to make you uncomfortable. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Especially in that CMO role. Bring in someone you trust, and Mike trusts Nikki, right? So bring in someone you trust, but's gonna make you uncomfortable. And I think that's the dynamic we're gonna see there, and I'm excited to see it. Yeah.
Let's hope they don't go into multi-channel marketing hubs next.
I'm just, please, God, yeah, I just, no, Lord Almighty, please stop. Yeah, no.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it all. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining me today. Great discussion, and thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.